can see that we've ticked off most of it, and so in that aspect, we're actually coming towards the close of our this one. And I'll just go through everything for once. I'm not sure if you all have a copy of the requirements, but I will go through everything once, and then I will filter out what needs to be done, and then I'll try to finish that soon. So hopefully, hopefully within 2 weeks we'll be done. Um, in another two, 3 classes maybe. Yeah. So that's the goal for now. That's the aim. And I was going through the assignments earlier, and I noticed that only few of you had submitted. I understand it is a little bit on short notice, but I feel for 5 slides it should have been enough time. But I understand if you're all busy during the weekend, and so please do it when you have time, and then we will. I will grade it accordingly. Now I will, for now, I will be sharing Roland's slides, um, and we'll just go through it quickly. And let's not be too harsh, okay? We will try to look at what's there, and then let's try to see if we notice anything that we learned, and then if we can spot it out. And there's some are titled, but you'll see. All right, so we have a very nice title page, and it looks very interesting and fun. It's casual and has a good look to it. And then as we proceed, we have the before and after. Now, first off, the first thing that you will notice is the aspect ratio has changed. Now you can see the one on the left has a um, very long photo. Most phones nowadays, when you take a vertical photo, and if you don't select the right aspect ratio, then it comes like this. So it's very long. But Roland noticed that he wanted the subject to fill the frame. He wanted the subject to be the main center. Like as soon as you look at the photo, the subject should be the one that draws attention. Okay, so not this empty sky and everything above. So what he did was he cropped into the photo, and then he made it so that the photo fills up more, and then the subject is a little bigger. So he cropped into the photo a little bit. Apart from that, he also adjusted the temperature. As you can see, the photo on the right looks a little colder, so it's a little cooler compared to the photo on the left. And then he added some filters to adjust the colors a little bit here and there. All right, so that was some of my observations. And another thing you can notice here is you can see there's a frame. Now, uh, I'm not saying every photo should have a frame, but where you can, then it's very nice. So here you can see there's a very white and plain empty background in the back. But because he shot through this frame, the first thing that we notice is the subject over here. Um, Sometimes I'm not saying that every photo should have something that is standing out, but I'm just starting to notice everything as I look at it with you guys. Okay, so we notice a frame, and not just the frame, but there are also signs of leading lines. As you can see along this door, there's leading lines, and sometimes we only notice some of these things later, but as we are observing now, it's good chance to learn and observe. So it's not very difficult to incorporate stuff. So when you have a chance, then I would encourage you to do so as well. Try and get as many as you can in that particular photo. All right, so moving on to the next slide. Here he says he's getting the landscape of the background. Well, first off, the first thing that you will notice as soon as you look at the picture is there's a lot of green, and there's one spot where there's a lot of red. So it stands out. All right. So the first thing that stands out is that color difference. So using color, he's made the subject pop. Now, uh, apart from that, I also noticed that he's made use of the rule of thirds here. Now you can, of course, the rule of thirds is not going to remain the same for every picture. It depends on the aspect ratio of your picture. But here, if you were to divide this picture in three from the top to bottom, then you would get something along this ratio, this thing over here. So he's placed his subject. This is not accurate, so it's almost accurate, but you can just ignore that. He's placed his subject towards the top right corner here. Okay, so that's nice. It could have been any honor, but yes. So that is there. And color, he's used color, so I like that. Um, Moving on, we will look at the next slide. Here, he mentions that he specifically used the rule of thirds, but I also like how he uses color and he expression. So he has a human subject, like a person, compared to the previous one where it was just a bag. And we have uh, a very nice background. It's taken during the cloud, like when there was a lot of clouds. So you can see the difference in lighting. The foreground or the area in front is a little brighter, and then the area behind gets darker. So there's more attention to the brighter areas. And in the brighter areas, there's this colorful shirt that this person is wearing, and his arms are spread wide. So attention goes there. And the main thing is the rule of thirds. Now, you may wonder how the rule of thirds works. Again, I'm just going to give a short recap this class because revision will really help you all to remember. So, the rule of thirds, it changes based on the photo. So now, for example, this photo is very wide. So when you divide this photo by three from top to down, then if this is the middle around here approximately, then roughly there'll be a line here and a line maybe around here. It's not perfect, but like somewhere there. And then from left to right, then if you were to divide this part, it'll probably be something like a little higher than that, and then something like this. All right. So going by that, we have the rule of thirds. Um, and you can see color and the rule of thirds. So that's very nice. And there's also some lines going like this. I see the path also goes this way. So it draws attention to the person, and then it slowly takes your attention to the mountain, and you see the scenery, everything behind. And then here's the second last slide where he mentions a necklace point. Now, here also I notice some points that I really like. For example, the subject is the main thing that you look at is this river over here, and the bend of the river is in the center. So if you were to draw a line from the top of the picture to the bottom, then you can see that it's almost identical to the left hand. It's symmetrical. So there's symmetry in this picture. So symmetry always makes a picture stand out and gives it a difference compared to just any other picture that you simply click. So for this, I'm sure he had to go to that specific place so that he could get that symmetry. So I can see the effort he put in that. And also, I want you to notice if you were to divide this picture, you can see a contrast. Okay, the top these two boxes are the sky and it's bright, and then the bottom two boxes are the ground and the horizon is level. Now some people like to take a picture that is slightly tilted, and the line of the horizon goes like this. That is also accepted, and it is sometimes used as a way of expressing something or to make stuff look more dynamic. But here he's kept it simple, and by doing so, it's like how do I put it? This it's not symmetry, but it's also kind of like the opposite of symmetry. So there's like symmetry in left and right, but the top and bottom is also a kind of symmetry, you could say, where the entire thing is reflected and in the opposite way. All right, so that's what we have from this slide over here. And the final thing was a thank you. And you can end your slides like this, and that's the end of this slideshow. Now, I want to go through all of our classes from the second class till the seventh class that we have, and I want to point out a few things, perhaps remind everyone on a few things that I think are more important. So I will quickly go through that, and just a moment. All right. So in our second class, we learned about the camera and its inner workings. Now we had the history and stuff like that. But for those who joined us late, this is how a camera works. Now you will see there's a division. There's the lens and the body, and the light enters, and there's a mirror inside. So that's why it's called a DSLR, because a DSLR has a single lens and it reflects. So digital single lens reflects camera. So that's a very simplified version of everything, all right? So there's a sensor and then the mirror is there. When you take a picture, the mirror moves up and then the sensor sees the light that is coming through the lens and it takes a picture. Now, a sensor is not always visible when you see the camera. This is the opening. As you can see, the mirror goes up. There's a shutter that covers and protects the sensor. Shutter comes down. The sensor sees what's outside the camera and then the shutter closes and the mirror comes down again. So that's basically how a picture is taken on a DSLR. Phones work a little differently where they don't have that physical mechanical shutter. They only use electrical signals, and using that, they click a picture when you tap on that section there. Now, I will not go through all of these again, but some of the main things is that the camera has a lot of functions that are similar across different cameras, whether it be from Canon, Sony, Nikon, Panasonic, Fuji, whatever camera you may have. If you have a DSLR or a mirrorless, then the functions would be similar. So by doing a little research, uh, you can really adapt and quickly understand what to change and how to change where. So almost every camera will have a shutter button where your index finger would be placed of your right hand. All right. And then you'll have more dials to adjust which mode you're taking pictures in. And of course, everything else depends on what camera you have. So it's a little different. Some of you who have cameras will notice that you also have shutter buttons and all that, but you may not have a DSLR, so it'll not be exactly the same. But yes, some of those principles that work are the same because where DSLRs were able to replace a lens, you may have a lens that's built into the camera. So you're not able to change it, but the inside of the camera will pretty much function the same. Now we learned about the physical aspects, the ports that the wires can be connected. Uh, Regardless of what brand they're in, they're similar. And then we learned that we have to put memory cards inside, usually on the right side, sometimes on the underside. They have displays and buttons and dials, and everything can be adjusted manually from the back side. And on the top, we have a hot shoe for attaching a flash, or recently they've come with technology where they can attach a mic and transmitters for flashes that are kept away from the camera. So hot shoes are used to uh, communicate with those different devices. Then we also at the bottom we have the battery, and for some cameras that's where the memory card goes in as well. Lenses are used to manipulate the way the light comes into the camera. So based on different lenses, you can get different pictures. And each lenses, each lens is specific for that camera brand. The lenses are made on uh, something on a system with a mount on it. So the lenses that you're seeing right now are lenses for the Canon EF mount. So all cameras that have that same mount will be able to work with any of these lenses. Now, granted, it is not usually seen where some of these expensive lenses are used with cheaper camera bodies. Like my camera body, for example, when we bought it, it was um, semi-amateur. Uh, it's not a high-end camera, but if I were to have access to one of these lenses, then these lenses would work with my camera because they have the same mount. Um, whether they are from the cheap 50 mm lens, these lenses are like about $100, or with yes, $100 is not cheap, but in photography, you find out that lenses can easily go up to thousands of dollars. So, for example, this lens at the bottom left, this is about $125, and you can easily get it refurbished for like 70 or $60. And some of these larger lenses on the back, or the lenses that have this red ring on them, they can go like $2,500 or sometimes $6,000 and $7,000. But those are for like professionals who earn money through photography and they're able to afford these. And they work with organizations such as National Geographic, or they work for uh, organizations or for governments and stuff like that. So they have official photographers. So that's how they cover those costs. Lenses have mounts. This metal part that you see is a mount, and for example, the Canon EF mount will not go on a Sony camera unless you have an adapter for that. And then there are prime lenses and zoom lenses. Prime lenses are the ones that you cannot zoom in by moving uh, the dial or this large ring over here. If you want the subject to be closer, then you have to go closer. You have to walk or get closer to the subject and take a picture. And zoom lenses allow you to have flexibility of standing in one place, but being able to zoom in and zoom out by only moving this circular ring. Now, what I'm showing right now is for Canon, but Nikon's lenses also, like there are primes and zooms across all camera companies, Canon, Nikon, or Sony, but the way they work may be a little different. For example, for Canon, this this ring that is closer to the camera is for zoom, and then the second one that's further away is for focus. Now for Nikon, it's the other way around. So the one that's further away will be for zoom, and the one that's closer is for focus. Um, for prime lenses, you only have one ring, and that's for focus only. You don't have a zoom ring. All right, so that was our recap of our second class. Now I will pause share and I'll quickly go to our third class. In our third class, we covered exposure and the exposure triangle. Now, I noticed that some of you submitted pictures that were slightly overexposed. Um, Sometimes that is left to the photographer to decide whether they intentionally want to or not. But in general terms, when you have a correctly exposed picture, that means the light is measured in the photo correctly. It's not too dark or not too bright. If it's too dark, we call it underexposed. If it's too bright, overexposed. Now, exposure or the amount of light or the brightness in your picture is determined by the exposure triangle, because there are three things that can affect your exposure: shutter speed, aperture, and ISO. Now, aperture is basically how big the opening of the lens is to allow light inside. The bigger the opening, the more light comes inside, and the brighter the picture will be. Brighter the picture will be. The smaller the opening, the less light will be able to enter through that small opening, and the picture will turn out to be darker. Now, uh, aperture also affects another thing. Now, you will notice that uh, Aperture is measured in f-stops, the number f1.8 or f5 or f11, f22. Now, the smaller the number, now if I'm saying f1.8, then that means the opening is bigger. All right. So if you see f2.8 here, the opening is larger, and f16, the number is larger, but then the opening is small. So it works opposite. All right. So when you say like f11 versus f2, then that means the f2 has a larger opening and the f11 has a smaller opening. Smaller the number, the bigger the opening. All right. And you'll also notice that when your aperture is large and open, then you get more background blur. The background is more blurred, and we call that depth of field. All right. Basically, the area that is in focus is very shallow, so the backside is all blurred out. But if you have a large aperture number and the opening is small, then you get more of the area in focus. That is aperture. Now, shutter speed is basically how quickly you take a picture. Now, I showed you a video earlier of the shutter moving down and up. That is basically the shutter speed um, in slow motion. Cameras click pictures a lot faster. Some cameras, professional cameras, can go up to 1/8000th of a second. So, yes, very quick. And the faster your picture is, you can freeze motion. There will not be any movement, and you'll be able to click and get that moment, particular moment. And if you have slower shutter speed, then light will, you will see motion and you will have movement in the picture, and the picture will be a little blurry. And sometimes people use that to get some really nice pictures. For example, here we see on the left, because they use a fast shutter speed, they're able to freeze action, and they got all these water droplets flying from the waves. But slowing it down, they also got this smooth, beautiful, dreamy look on this photo. So based on how you use shutter speed, you can um, really convey motion and use it to stand out. All right. So for example, fast shutter speed, you're getting all these water droplets, but slow shutter speed, you would not get that. Instead, you get lines. The water will be in the lines. Here, you can see they use the slow shutter speed to get the traffic lines and this the lines on the wheel. That was shutter speed and aperture. Now we have ISO. Now, ISO is basically how sensitive the camera is going to be to light. The lower the ISO, the lesser the camera will have to work to background to artificially make the picture brighter. Now, the higher the ISO, the brighter the picture will be, which you may think is better, but it'll also add noise to your picture. There will be grain. Now, you will notice better here in this slide, you can see that on the left side, you have a clean picture. The black over here is clean. It looks nice and neat. On the right side is brighter, but you will see that the picture is noisy. You can see there's a lot of dots, grain. It looks very coarse and rough. That's because that grain is added there. Noise and grain is basically uh, two terms referring to the same thing. They refer to this artificially added dots that you see. I'm sure if you have seen, for, I don't know if the younger generation may have seen, but for the older generation, those who are like 15 and above, um, when we have a television and there's no signal, we see the static, right? We see the black and white and gray dots all over the screen, static. So that, imagine that overlaid. All right, so that is how noise and grain is. So a lot of dots everywhere. So ISO can be adjusted in the camera. Now, my advice would be when it's dark, is to adjust the ISO the last. All right. So first adjust the aperture and the shutter speed, see where you're getting a good balance. And then if it's still dark, then you adjust the ISO. It's recommended to keep the ISO as low as possible, but do not keep that in mind and then think, oh, I should not increase ISO at all. Increase it. If you have to, then you have to increase the ISO. It is much more preferred to have a higher ISO and a sharp picture, like one that is not blurry by movement, than to have a lower ISO but blurry picture, one that you cannot really see properly. Now, when it's dark, you'll have to use a slower shutter speed to allow more light inside, right? Because you want the camera to have more time to take picture. So then if the person moves, then they are blurred, they are shaky, and the picture is not clean. So at that point, you can increase the ISO and also increase the shutter speed, so you're able to have more sensitiveness, and you can also click the picture faster. That is what we covered in our third class. Now let me quickly open our fourth class. In our fourth class, we revised on aperture again, and we talked about resolution. Camera resolution is basically uh, how many pixels you have on your camera. Now, most of you use phones and laptops, and you would have noticed that many of you will notice when they advertise a screen as being full HD, that means there's a certain number of pixels, and then there's 4K and everything. All that basically means how many pixels are there on your display. Now, if you were to take a full HD display, then you have 1920 by 1080. Uh, that is a resolution of a full HD thing. Now, if you have a lower, just normal HD, then that will be 1280 by 720. So you will, on YouTube, you may have seen 720p or 1080p. So that's basically what resolution means. The higher the resolution, the clearer things are, more information is there. All right. So cameras have resolution on their sensors as well. So the higher resolution that the sensor has, the more megapixels and the more detail you'll be able to capture. Now, if you were to zoom in completely, then this is what it'll look like. Different sensors are a little different, but yeah, they have red, R, G, and B, red, green, blue sensors. And by adjusting how these values are read, they can produce different colors, uh, yellow, orange, everything, by combining these different colors. Now, if I were to divide and start from the bottom and go from like just 2 pixels, like if I were to take a picture of something that was just using a 2 pixel camera, then I'll just get something like this. There'll just be no information basically. It's just you'll only be able to see how bright or dark something is. But if I were to increase a resolution and get 4 pixels, then I would have some more information. As I increase the resolution, I'm getting more and more detail. I'm able to see the shape more clearly. As I come to 64 pixels, I'm able to see a shape. I can see that there's something like a mountain. And when I go all the way up, then I'm able to see like this is thousands and thousands of pixels. And that's how I'm able to see the whole mountain. All right. So just for illustration purposes, I'm going to open up a photo in Photoshop. Photoshop allows you to, on the computer, it allows you to zoom in to the level of pixels. So that's why I want to show it to you. And just bear with me. I'll just try to get a picture very quickly into Photoshop, and then we proceed. You'll also have to bear with me because I have a cold. And yeah, I need to sleep properly, and then hopefully I'll get better by tomorrow. Now, here you can see, I've opened up the picture in Photoshop. You can see everything looks very clear, and the subject is outlined very nicely and all that. So this is what it looks like to have a picture in high resolution. Now, when I check the properties of this picture, I can see that they shot this at a very high resolution, but when they uploaded it online, they obviously reduced the quality. So right now I'm having How much is this? 660. All right, so this is about 5.8 megapixel. Megapixel basically means million pixels. So when you have a picture like this, it's basically 5.8 million pixels. So when you zoom in, you will start to notice uh, individual pixels. All right. So now you're starting to see some lines go from top to bottom. Each of this is an individual pixel. All right. And if you look carefully, you will see that each pixel has only one color value. There's no gradient, no variation within that. Within that one pixel, that's the only value. So that's how they record. So each pixel will only take its own value, and then only when you see from afar, you will be able to see. I'm sorry, I zoomed in when I was pausing the share. I want you to look again. When you see from afar, you can see the whole thing. All right, you see everything. You see lines, and you can see lines, shadow. But when you zoom in very carefully, you will see the pixels. All right. So each of these values in pixels are recorded by the pixel recording only its own individual thing. Now, if you look here, within this pixel, you only see one gray, that's it. And then if you move this side, here, just one color, that's it. All right. That pixel only values measures its own value. And that's how pixels record. But when you see on a larger scale, when you see all the pixels come together, then you're able to tell, oh, it goes from light to dark, this shadow there. And that's how, on a larger scale, you're able to see the difference. By a show of thumbs up, I want everyone to let me know if you're able to see the lines and the pixels when I zoomed in. Were you able to see everything? I don't know how it looks like on your end, that's why. All right, so I'm able to see. Thank you for your response. All right, so that was Photoshop. So that's how resolution works. Now, having more megapixels or a higher resolution means you have sharper pictures, you can zoom in more and you have more detail. And having less megapixel means you have less detail and less room to work it. You cannot zoom so much. And yeah, that's the difference in megapixel basically. Lenses, we covered lenses, the different zooms and primes and everything. So you can see here, lenses are measured in MMs. All right. So the smaller the number, the more wide everything is. And you can see here 28 mm is a very wide thing. You're able to see more, you're able to see the buildings nearby and the sky and everything. But the bottom right, if you see 200 mm, it's zoomed in very close. So when you have more you're zoomed in even more. So there's wide lenses that have like 14 28 usually in that range. And sometimes they can distort and have that fish eye look, and it can show more of the environment in the picture. Telephoto lenses zoom in more. Um, they're not really used for landscapes and all that. Telephoto is used more for like close up of people and animals, birds, or at a wedding where the photographer has to stand back and take a picture of the bride and groom on stage. So all those, they use telephoto lenses. There's also macro, a third group, which is used for taking close up, but not it's not as widespread and not as common. Phones have fixed lenses you cannot change compared to DSLR where you can change the lenses. Phones are fixed, but nowadays some cameras are coming with 2, 3 different lenses, and you're able to take different views. So iPhones, Androids, whatever you may have, I'm sure you would have come across phones with different lenses, and you would have seen some wide angle shots using a wide angle uh, lens, and you can see the difference. Now, the rule of thirds, as I mentioned, is when you divide the photo uh, in sections, into 9 sections, basically. So from if you're looking at the top part, then you will notice that along this line, sorry, let me just clear that. along this line here, I've divided that line into 3 parts. All right, 3 equal parts. And that's how I'm getting these lines that come from top to bottom. And along this line, vertical line up down, I divided that also into 3 parts. And that's how I get the lines going across. Now, this will change based on the picture that you are taking. What do I mean by that? Is that if the picture that I'm taking is going to be, let's say, let me just rotate this. Okay, if the picture you're taking is vertical, now the top is no longer as wide. All right, the top is no longer that wide. It is only this wide. So within this width, I will divide into 3, and then I will get these vertical lines. And now the picture is very tall, so then I'll get like this. All right. If your picture is to change in aspect ratio, then you will have to adjust the rule of thirds accordingly. Now, for example, let me just make this like a square. Then the rule of thirds is different. You can see the rule of thirds changes in accordance to the picture, how the picture is. If the picture is wide, then you have to let more room in that area, and then the rule of thirds changes. If it's tall, then it's also changing along. Those lines will be based on the height and width of your picture. All right. Now, there are many ways to take a picture based on the rule of thirds. Yes, you can have a picture centralizing everything. So the main subject that you want to picture can be in the middle, or you can use the rule of thirds to take a picture where the main subject is on the left side, or on the right side, or in the center, or it can also be the other way around, and it can be the bottom, middle, or top, or sometimes it can be the middle and bottom, something like this, or it can be top and middle, something like that. Now you would have noticed earlier that Ruler's picture of the landscape was where the necklace point was there. It was something like this, where the picture was divided half and half, top and bottom. Now, while not exactly rule of thirds, it kind of comes under that. Um, and we'll count it as one. And the rule of thirds also states that you can place a subject along these lines. For example, if I were to place, you saw that he had that bag at the top right, and it was at this intersection over here. It can be along these intersections or along these lines anywhere. All right. So by doing so, you're able to um, get their attention there, because that's one of the easiest way to tell the story and have people's attention drawn there. Now, for some of the examples that we saw here, we see that they've placed their subjects at the rule of thirds here. These photographers have edited it or taken the picture in such a way that it comes this way. As a reminder, when you're taking pictures of animals or people and you want to focus on them, not just their whole body, but just on them, then try to focus on their eyes, get their eyes sharp, and have the rule of thirds, that intersection at their eye. Now, here we have some more rule of thirds where the puppy is being placed on that right side line. And here on this over here, we can see a rule of thirds being observed here, where there's 2 rule of thirds being applied here. For example, this is on the bottom right, and this circle over here, encirclement begins on the top left. All right, so that's also another example of the rule of thirds. So we covered rule of thirds in that class, and I encourage all of you to try and observe and find how you can incorporate this rule in your photos. Now, this is just the primary rule of thirds. There are many more in detail stuff that you can do, and there are other rules as well. But the rule of thirds is one of the most commonly known and most widely used thing. So practice that. All right. Um, that is what we covered in that class. In our 5th class, we covered framing and stuff like that. Now, framing again, it can be difficult based on where you are and how the scenario is. So where it's possible, please do so. And here we can see this person uses mountain and this entrance of this cave like opening here to take this picture, and it looks like a frame, and the entire scenery is within this frame. Similarly, here we have this mountain that's within this frame of this dead tree, or the Taj Mahal within this frame of the door. And you can see framing, and even we saw in Roland's picture of that doorway where he was standing in that door, and then that door was a frame for him. I also mentioned leading lines, where we have the photographer position himself and the camera in such a way that the environment line that you see lines in the environment leading towards the subject. All right. So for example, here we see different lines that are all pointing towards the I don't mean this white lines are pointing towards him. I mean the lines of this bridge. You can see there are different lines. Even these metal screws or bolts or nuts, these things also form a line pointing towards him. The horizon points towards him. They form a line, and this tree line and the house's roof, they also point towards him. All these lines are pointing towards the center here, and that so when we look at this picture, we subconsciously look at the center. We look at him because all these lines lead our eyes to look at that person or at the subject over there. Similarly, here in our uh, other example that we saw, uh, there are lines here that cause us to look where the photographer wants us to look. Subconsciously, that's the first thing we see, and then we see the rest of the things. So try to capture the attention and get them to look where you want them to, get them to look where you want them to see. Use lines in your picture, and you get to control where and how they see. Use lines, observe, look around you for lines, whether it's straight or curved or round, it doesn't matter. Use the lines. Then we also learned perspective, where by adjusting stuff, the distance or the angle of stuff, you're able to play around and be creative and experiment with stuff. Here we see keeping the shoes closer to the camera made the shoes look very large, so it looks comical and funny and creative. Here, by rotating the photo that is originally taken like this, uh, of course, must have taken some effort, but by taking a photo of that and inverting it, it looks like he's sitting on something and letting his feet hang down. That's also very creative, very smart. Here, by having the person stand far away and this cup close to the camera, it looks like there's a giant cup and the person behind is hanging from it or holding it, something like that. And here, using props, they're incorporating it into their photo where it looks creative. It's just creative. It looks nice and it stands out. This picture stands out compared to if it is just normal picture of the clouds because they have this prop in their photo. All right. So we quickly went through everything that we covered, and I want to just quickly here on my screen go through the requirements that we were having for our digital photography class. And I'm seeing that I've covered most of things. All right. Um, if you have any doubts, you can start to type them down, or you can unmute yourself and ask. But before you use that, I want to mention one more thing. Experiment, practice, and go out and shoot as much as possible. All right. Now, uh, you may not learn to be a professional photographer uh, within within 3 months or 2 months, and there are some places where you can go and learn the basics, and sometimes you can get a course, study it, yes, uh, but usually photography is developed and you learn the skill over years. All right, so what we covered so far could be a starting point, or you may have started before this also, but you can improve and teach yourself and learn over time well into the coming years. Uh, and you can, it's always about improvement. There's no perfect photograph. All right. It's always about getting better and better, more effort. Now, for example, what do I mean by effort? Now, some pictures look better taken during the day. Some pictures look better taken during the night. So you may have to work on that and see how you can work on getting that right. Timing is also everything. Now, if you were to take a photo during summer, everything would look different compared to how you were to take a picture during monsoon or winter. And so then you'll have to be flexible with that. Work with those things that you cannot adjust. See the factors, measure everything, and keep everything in mind. And as you grow, I hope that all of you are able to build on what you're watching and learning during these classes. And I would highly recommend that all of you go on YouTube and start subscribing to those photographers that you see on YouTube. All right. So some of the photographers that I would recommend that you uh, that you follow on YouTube would be this person called Peter Mckinnon. Um, all right, so you can see here Peter Mckinnon. Um, he teaches not just photography but also video, and a lot of what I learned is learned from his channel, and it's very useful. And you can pick up a lot of tips from his videos. Now you can go through his playlists. Most of the videos that I watched were from a couple years ago, but they are applicable across photography, so it doesn't matter when it was. You can go back and watch his old videos as well. All right, and apart from that, I keep watching videos from um, Potato Jet. You can look at Potato Jet. He's also a videographer, more on video, but a lot of things that you learn on photo and video is applicable across um, both like what you learn for photo right now so far is also applicable in video. So video also has ISO, shutter speed, aperture, and resolution and everything. All that leading lines, rule of thirds, everything applies to video as well. All right, so keep that in mind. So go online. I'm sure you will find different communities based on different styles of photography. So you can do that as well. All right, so we have that. Now, at this time, we're very close to 9:30, so I'm going to give you all time to ask if you have any doubt. And if you have your doubts, you can ask. And if not, then we will close for this week. And I want to say that the reason I gave a revision here was because I'll be posting a test on the classroom. Uh, Not right away, but I will post a test within the next 2 weeks, and that will be like a uh, final test for covering everything that you learned so far, and it will be uh, a recap of everything that you've learned so far. So try to do your best on that, and that is how I will be grading you on your photography honor. So hopefully you were paying attention to all the classes, and uh, I wish you all the best in your test, and may you take great pictures. Okay. So if you have any doubts regarding anything that we covered so far, then you can ask